Hey, welcome everybody. It's Friday afternoon and we're here for another edition of The Green Rush here on Pro Cannabis Media. I'm your host, David Rabinovitz, joined by one of our regulars, Morgan Fox of NCIA. We got a special guest with us, Erik Altieri of NORML. If you don't know NORML, you should. National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, one of the oldest advocacy groups in the United States. And my co-host for today, Misu of New Jersey. Tara, great to have you with us.
Great to be here. As always, I'm excited to talk about women in cannabis.
Cool. So let me, Morgan, we hear from you a lot. So we're going to get started with you, but I want to give Erik a moment. Introduce yourself, talk a little bit about NORML.
Sure. As Dave mentioned, I'm Erik Altieri, the Executive Director of NORML. We have been founded and existing for 50 years now. We focus as our work on the cannabis consumers lobby. We advocate on part of the consumer as we move towards legalization. We are based here with our national office in Washington, DC, and we have over 300 chapters across the country that work at state and local levels to improve marijuana laws there. And our primary goal is to give a platform to grassroots activists to make sure they take a stake in changing the laws in their own backyard. And it's a pleasure to be here with y'all today to talk about what I think are some exciting developments this week in cannabis.
Great. Erik, it's great to have you. And for anybody who is, obviously, we are about the business of cannabis. And one of the things you should know, while Erik talked about the fact that NORML is consumer focused, they have a wealth of information on their website, even if you're business focused. They've got maps that you click buttons, it'll show you which states are adult use, which states are CBD only, which states are medical. They've got summaries of all the different laws by state and territory. It's a great website if you're looking for a resource.
I definitely use it a lot when I'm talking to reporters and lawmakers. So
I'm sorry, who said that? Oh, Morgan. I didn't recognize you without a hat today. Morgan's joins us.
Terrible haircut at the moment.
Yeah, Morgan joins us once a month. And for the past X number of months, every time he joins, he's got a different hat on. So that's kind of like the running joke with Jimmy and I. So let's talk a little bit about, I think, what actually, I'm going to spin it around. What would you guys say is the biggest news right now in the cannabis sector?
Well, I think that having Republican backing for a legalization bill is probably the biggest news right now. The question is, will it go anywhere? And will it be able to get enough of other GOP backing in order to actually be able to make some moves in Congress right now? It's also a difficult situation because you have the House being democratically controlled and them pushing another bill, the MORE Act, as well as several other pieces of incremental legislation. But really, I think that this should be a wake-up call to the Senate to actually start looking at this issue much more seriously and start holding hearings on cannabis-related bills, whether they be incremental or comprehensive.
Well, and I think the big takeaway here, too, is what we know from poll after poll after poll is that amongst the people, legalizing marijuana is a very much bipartisan issue. For the past several years, we've seen for the first time in Gallup and Pew and polls that have done this for a very long time, we're now seeing a majority of not just Democrats and independents supporting legalization. We're seeing a majority of Republican voters. The bigger trick here is how do we convert that public support into political support? So bills like the previous one introduced by Representative David Joyce out of Ohio, which was a Republican-led effort to deschedule marijuana, and the new MACE bill this week are kind of the exact strategy we need to start building that coalition, which will finally knock down federal prohibition in this country.
And I mean, we've seen throughout history that politicians are way behind the people on this issue. And we can just look at the polling on that to see, the truth of that. And this goes for Democrats as well as Republicans. We see Democratic support being very vocal, but at the same time, not being very deep and very strong and not prioritizing these issues, even though they are very important to everything that Democrats are holding dear in terms of their policy goals. And we're seeing Republican voters who are consistently supporting these things, but yet their elected lawmakers are really behind the times on this and still purporting things like the gateway theory and worrying about traffic fatalities, despite the fact that we have not seen any sort of relation between legalization and negative impacts in that respect. This is just emblematic of the fact that our elected leaders are way behind the times and really need to start listening to their constituents. And at some point, they are going to start feeling the burn from that.
Well, and you touched on perfectly. I always say, by nature, politicians are cowardly creatures. They won't form the parade, but once it's formed, they'll rush to lead it. And over all these years, NORML, MPP, NCIA, all of the activists across the country have formed that parade. And now here in DC, we're trying to convince these legislators to come lead it. And the more bills we have, the better we are positioned to build that support.
Tara, jump in.
Thanks, I'm trying. Yeah, so it's interesting that you say the Republican Democratic thing. I think this has been so well illustrated in Jersey. Of 69% of our voters passed support last year for legalization. 69%, that means it's across gender lines, it's across party lines. Everyone wanted this legalized, right? So now we're walking around the state house, we're talking to legislators, this and that, when we were trying to get it done legislatively. And, of course, obviously it is always more of a Democratic issue, but we're talking to Republican lawmakers and they'll straight tell you, oh yeah, I smoke weed. I love weed. Weed's great. Yeah, that's not going to work for me. I need to worry about reelection and my base won't support that. Well, okay. So that was phase one. Now we're into phase two, where it's like, okay, your base did support that because we have 565 municipalities in New Jersey and only 3 did not pass it. It passed in almost every one. 2 of them, it was a tie, and 1 was a very conservative Orthodox Jewish community. Everywhere else it passed. So now you're not listening to your base. And aside from not listening to your base, you're not enacting the will of your residents, because now we have it. And now everyone's doing the not in my backyard thing. And it's like, but wait, your backyard voted to have this, and the local governments aren't supporting it. So it passed with about 69% support, so about 70-30. You could almost flip that, and that's how many towns have opted in. We have it's like somewhere in the teens support of towns opting in to actually have legal cannabis sales. So it's absolutely ridiculous. Yeah.
Right. But I think
the opting out is a serious problem. And NIMBYism is something that we've seen in state after state after state. If you look at every single regulated state, it's a very small percentage of municipalities that actually opt into supporting a regulated cannabis market. And that's really unfortunate, because the communities that opt out of that are not only missing out on tax revenue, but they're also contributing to the continued existence of an unregulated market and potentially putting cannabis consumers at risk.
Yeah, Tara, that's an incredibly good point. Not only is this a problem once we legalize it and how the state deals with it, Jersey's the perfect example where you see these moratoriums on businesses go into place, despite the fact these people represent the same towns that just voted overwhelmingly for it. It's the poll of all polls, right? The ballot box. And yet they're still ignoring the will of their people.
Well, actually, let me throw in a competing comment on that one, right? Because when last time Tara and I were together was down in Atlantic City a few weeks ago. And I spoke to a few attorneys down there because I was really surprised. In New Jersey, there was more support at the ballot box than there was up in Massachusetts, and yet more municipalities bowed out. And then one of the attorneys explained something to me that seems to make a lot of sense. The municipalities had a deadline by which if they were going to bow out, they had to bow out. But the regulations weren't published. So they were basically being told, you're going to be into something that you don't know what all the rules are. And the way the attorney explained it to me, plenty of them just said, we're bowing out. And he said within the next year or so, he expects a lot of those to come back in, because now that the regulations are published, they can actually get their arms around it, understand it, and now they'll know what they're coming in for, and they can plan for it accordingly. So I don't think you're going to see the same sort of not in my backyard in New Jersey as we've experienced up in Massachusetts. I could be wrong. I mean, I don't know.
Well, you look at Colorado, and most of the municipalities in Colorado still do not allow cannabis sales or cannabis businesses to operate within their jurisdiction. So this is something that actually goes on for quite some time. after legalization and after regulations and after the implementation of successful business practices across the board for cannabis. Honestly, it would be much better for municipalities to opt in and get in on the ground floor of determining exactly what the cannabis policies are, both at the state level as well as at the federal or the local level, as opposed to waiting until everybody else makes the decisions for them.
Yep.
And California is a great example where it's actually been kind of debilitating to the success of the state program. You had so many large cities and municipalities opt out that it clearly impacted their projections on tax revenue and other income streams, where they assumed that everyone would have access. And in California, to this day, there's huge tracts of the population that are in places where they can't even have a marijuana outlet near them. And that's been a huge problem for them.
Yeah, I mean, people in the Inland Empire sometimes have to drive hours to find a legal source of cannabis, and that does nothing but deprive municipalities of tax revenue, deprive local authorities of the ability to have any sort of control over the industry, and perpetuates the existence of an unregulated market.
Yeah, I would love to reply to what David said about Jersey, if that's okay. So what was interesting, what you said about that, about the deadline and the same day is, okay, so that was everyone, what they went under. That was their umbrella to chicken out, basically, because August 19th, and it was a bit silly. The regs were coming out and the deadline to opt in or out were the same day. That doesn't make sense.
Right.
Well, it's been a couple months since then, and the regs have been out. And no one really looked at them, because if they did, you would see the blanket they all hid under, which is we don't have guidance. We're afraid to be at the mercy of the state for whatever regulations they push out. Didn't happen. Basically, what the CRC, the Cannabis Regulatory Commission, said is you can choose where you want it, what type of, there's 6 different license classes. You pick the types you want, you pick where in your town you want them. We'll leave all the zoning up to you. We'll leave the hours, what they can do, what they can't, everything. They deferred completely to the towns, and the towns don't know it. So the towns are still saying, we don't have guidance, we don't have regulations, we don't. Okay, so much like everything else in cannabis, it's just an education problem. And people within the towns are just asking, when are we getting weed? And no one, and it's people like me or other organizations, people like, NORML, NCIA, all of them, who go around and educate mayors and local government, because there's people educating them on the other side saying, oh no, you don't want this in your town. And it's literally us going town to town, mayor to mayor, getting people to opt in because they don't know what they don't know.
Right.
Well, my heart tells me that I really hope David is right, but my Jersey roots, I grew up in Gloucester County, tell me that it's a lot more deeper and problematic than that. And it's going to take a lot of work to move some of these very, despite whether they have a D next to their name or not, very conservative town and municipality governments that are very reactionary and have a knee-jerk reaction to be against this.
And we've seen this problem happening already in New Jersey, but also in states like Massachusetts and elsewhere, where the local control, local control is well and good, but the fact that states that do realize that they have this or this amount of power at the local level, you see a lot of localities basically extorting cannabis businesses and trying to make them pay exorbitant fees just to operate within their localities. And that naturally skews things towards more well-funded operators and away from startups or people that are from marginalized communities or low-income operators or social equity operators. And they can't afford to pay what is basically the extortion bribery fees that localities are trying to charge just to be able to get the slip of paper that says that they're allowed to operate here, that they need in order to get the state license.
Extortion and bribery in New Jersey?
From there,
right. It thus requires us as activists and everyone out there to be a little smarter about it. There's ways we can implement things where we make sure state laws, whether you ban dispensaries or not, allow things like delivery services. We can put in provisions where if you opt out, you don't get access to the tax revenue as some states.
That would be a great idea. That's actually something we would be great if we could do up here in Mass. Well, they have something similar in Massachusetts. You don't, the tax revenue goes to the municipality that hosts the seller, not the community that they deliver to, but we've got our own unique rules around that. So that you can, Right now, you can ban home delivery if you want, if you're a municipality. You mentioned, Erik, you started to mention something about the greed side, right? If you think of, or the money side of things, you guys are, relatively speaking, all much younger than me. Does the name Gordon Gekko mean anything to anybody here? All right. Remember the great Gordon Gekko speech, greed is good. That's all about money. One of the things we've seen in Massachusetts is one of the municipalities have glommed onto the revenue potential for marijuana. And we've got 7.1 million residents up here in Massachusetts. You got 9.4 million. That's about 30% more people. And you've got fewer municipalities as a percentage that are going to allow licensees right now, which means those municipalities that allow licensees will eventually start to bring in some heavy tax revenue. And based upon what we've seen in Massachusetts, when the first municipalities started to report the amount of revenue that they were receiving from the marijuana operators, $1 million checks for very small towns out in Western Mass on the New York border, that's when people's eyes started to light up. The town that I'm in, I happen to also live in the same town as one of the leading marijuana cannabis attorneys in the state. A couple of weeks ago at the fall town meeting, they wanted to do a couple of things. One was absolutely put a ban on home delivery. And the other one was they're going to take these community impact fees and shift them over. And Blake and I were very successful in delaying both of those until the spring town meeting. So they didn't ban home delivery the way they wanted to. And we convinced the town folk that they're not supposed to touch these community impact fees until they actually have a real offsetting cost. But the town administrative folks were not happy with us.
Well,
why?
this is kind of a problem.
We're trying to hold on to the purse strings. Money talks. And I think that you're going to see within a year or so, some of the municipalities are going to look at how much money the few municipalities that are allowing licensees in New Jersey are pulling in. And they're going to start to get jealous, and hopefully the greed factor will set in.
Well, I mean, to an extent, the idea that your neighbors are getting tax revenue and you are not should absolutely be an encouragement for localities to start licensing cannabis businesses.
Absolutely.
The problem is you don't want them to get too greedy because you can't squeeze blood from a stone. And the more that you try to hyper tax cannabis businesses, the more you're just encouraging the existence of an unregulated market and creating higher barriers to entry for people that might be in the legacy market to move into the regulated market. Yep. So you have to find that dividing line and that balancing act basically to convince localities that yes, it is a benefit for you to be able to have cannabis businesses in your localities and be able to have all of the not only the overall revenue but also the tax revenue and increased traffic and increased security that come with cannabis businesses. And this has been shown in study after study. Property values go up, security goes up, crime goes down anywhere where there are cannabis businesses.
Yeah,
but if you squeeze them too hard, then people start going to the unregulated market. And so it's a very difficult line to walk with local administrators and local politicians to make sure that they don't squeeze these businesses out of existence, but still allow them to actually operate in their localities and within their jurisdictions.
And up there with you, David, in Massachusetts, you know about barriers to entry, wasn't it? You had to escrow nearly $1 million to even be considered for some of these licenses, and that really narrows down who can even engage. Is it going to be marginalized communities, those who are most impacted? Is it going to be the average, Massachusetts resident getting involved? No, it's going to be the big businesses, which is the other fight we're going to still have to have. And then in the states where they're still debating legalization, we have the whole other spectrum where sometimes the medical dispensaries want to protect their monopolies. And then you have greed coming from that angle. So it's about focusing it around the people and the citizens and the patients. And it's a fight I think all of us have been kind of engaged with for a long time. And we've seen a lot of progress, but there's still a lot more work to do.
Yeah, I mean, this should be a justice-focused conversation across the board. But as long as people don't get too greedy, everybody can profit from it financially, but also socially.
Yep. I've been throwing a lot of notes down here. We could keep going, but folks, stay with us. We're going to take our 4:20 break. And because it's weed time, we're going to take it 7 minutes late, but that's okay. We're going to be right back we'll be back in a few moments here in the Green Rush.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm gonna sit down in my rented car. I'm gonna jam it into drive. Gonna head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Every night and day, we're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Nice. It's Friday. Thank God. Thank God Jonathan Edwards is joining us live in the WSCA studios.
And welcome back. It's Friday afternoon. Here we are in the Green Rush. We started off with a really great discussion. We probably could have gone on for another 30, 40 minutes, but the focus of today's show is women in cannabis. And we've got three really great women with us. They're well known in the industry, and they each have different perspectives doing different things. And rather than me introduce them, I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and then I'm going to toss it over to my co-host, Tara Misu. So why don't we start with Asia?
Hey, everyone. My name is Asia Atwood. Thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate the opportunity to share the story. I am the co-founder of Trella Technologies, and we've developed a way to train a plant to grow horizontally so we can grow tall plants in small spaces. And looking forward to sharing the story.
Cool. So, well, since Sarah G, since you're unmuted, let's go to you.
All right. Hi. Thanks so much for having me, Sara Gullickson. I'm the CEO and founder of the Cannabis Business Advisors. We basically help people with license applications, acquisitions, and operations.
And Sarah C.
Hi, I'm Sarah Chase. I'm the Executive Director for the Council for Federal Cannabis Regulation, and we're a nonprofit located here in DC. We work directly with the federal agencies and a lot of the entities here in DC and across the country, along with industry, to help normalize, destigmatize, and legitimize the cannabis industry.
Cool.
Awesome. Fantastic. Great to meet you guys. What a nice gamut to run.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, David, go ahead.
Okay. So Asia, tell us about what was the genesis of your product idea? What did it take? Because as I recall, you had to go through a lot of engineering to get that device together. And I remember it was the talk of Boston for quite a while. Tell us how long did it take, right? Because people look at companies and they think, oh, wow, they're an overnight success. And many times for big companies, they don't realize they've been around for 20 years, right? And I know you had to put a lot of effort into developing that product. Walk us through some of that, some of the challenges and challenges that you feel you had or disadvantages from coming at it, from being a woman in what has been in many ways a male-dominated industry.
Yeah. So, it was a problem that I was looking to solve for myself. I grew cannabis as a medicinal patient in my basement and had ways to automate my lights, automate my nutrients, pH, but couldn't figure out a way to control the height of the plant, the shape of the plant. And for those of you that are cultivators, getting a nice even canopy that doesn't run into the lights is key. So how do you do that when you're traveling, for a week at a time? You need to figure out a way to automate it. So I'm an engineer. I got together with a friend of mine who's also an engineer, and we looked around for a solution and found out that it did not exist. So we decided way back in 2016 to try to solve that solution. And we've been at it ever since. We were able to, you're right, David, we spent, the first 2 to 3 years just working on the design, showing it to the market, getting feedback, tweaking the design, getting our patent. We finally had our patent issued to us January of 2021. So that took a while. I mean, we sat down to talk about it in 2016, and by 2021, you get a patent. And we're now thankfully at the point where we have customers and we're getting into the market, and we're making strides, but it took a while. I'd have to say that, as a woman from the engineering, industry, I am used to being around a, predominantly male, a men environment. So for me, the cannabis space isn't much different than from where I left in my corporate life. The difference is the opportunity and so many different things that can be done. And it is actually it's exciting to see, my fellow sisters in the space as well, doing some amazing things. So there's space for everybody. And I think we just have to, try to remember that there's space for everybody and not lock people out of this opportunity. But go ahead.
So are you you're full time at this now?
Yeah. Started 2019 full time.
So the first 3 years it was juggling a life and the business, right? And I've been around entrepreneurs for probably 40 years. It's like raising a child, right? Because when the business is small, it may not be changing the diapers, but there's a lot of other messy details you have to deal with. Right? Trying to get it right.
And I finally have something to compare that to. In April 2021, my wife and I welcomed our son. So now I also have a son to celebrate, in addition to the success of Trella. But the first 3 years it was difficult. We bootstrapped. My co-founder and I used our own money to get us through the first 3 years, trying to juggle a full-time job and staying on top of this and staying passionate and not giving up. There's a lot. So for anybody that's out there that's still working the full time and looking forward to that day where you can, pull the cord completely and step away, be patient with yourself, be gentle with yourself, which you'll get there. You'll get there. Don't quit.
Can I ask? I'm so curious. So maybe I'm thinking, if I don't know this, there must be other people thinking it. When you said grow a plant horizontally, my first thought was roots here and whoop, but I think that's not what you mean, because I was like, wait, but that would be good to have, tiers as well. So Yeah. So I think what you're saying is that no matter the strain or the type of plant, that it grows more bush-like, so you don't have to worry about it shooting up. Is that what we're talking about?
No, actually, your first inclination was correct. We're actually training a plant to grow sideways, to grow horizontally. Basically, what we do is using something called phototropism, which is the plant's tendency to grow towards the light.
Mhm.
We allow it to grow towards the light, but we move it to the side ever so gently and ever so slightly over time, so that you wind up getting a controlled height plant that can then flourish and grow to harvest. You're exactly right. The main goal of this is not just cannabis, it's all types of plants, that fruiting plants, so that we can grow them in vertically stacked configurations and keep the heights consistent no matter what type of plant you're growing, so that it helps with operating costs and plant maintenance as well.
So you'll be able to utilize less square footage and have a higher yield. Then.
That's right. And yep, and faster as well. We're also tracking the growth rate of the plant with an app. We have an app attached to it as well. So we're checking temperature, humidity, CO2, and we're also tracking how fast that vegetative growth is occurring, so that we can optimize and do better on the next round to get quicker, faster harvests.
Wow, we need to talk offline. That's amazing.
Yeah, for sure. Hit me up.
So I got into the cannabis space inadvertently in 2010. I was not really a user. When Massachusetts legalized medical cannabis and I was making presentations in front of municipal boards, I used to tell them I've smoked less weed in my life than any of our prior 3 sitting presidents. So I figure I'm under the legal limit. But for most of the time I've been in this business, I've seen Sara G somewhere in the industry. So you've been a face that's been around quite a bit. Tell us a little bit about your practice, what states you do business in, how many people have you helped get licensed, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. So I guess I could call myself an OG of the industry. I started the industry, back when the trade shows were, 500 of us kind of looking around at each other like, who's going to go to jail, even though we knew we weren't doing anything illegal. So I think I've been in the cannabis industry about 13 years. I started in the hydroponic space, actually. And then we had a small division of our company that really worked towards legalization. So whether that was meeting with, people that were interested, or I guess politicians that were interested in creating medical programs. And then we would follow up with meeting with the entrepreneurs that wanted to submit their RFP or their RFA. So request for proposal or request for application. And we've helped, dozens of people secure licenses all over the country. I think I've worked in like 25 some odd states, and in 5 different countries. So that was kind of like how I got into the industry. And then back in 2018, I sold my first cannabis company. And then I had non-compete for a little while. I also had a son and a daughter that are probably right around Asia's babies' ages, or a little bit older. Was able to take a little bit of time off, and I, tried to figure out if I, still love the industry. And the answer was obviously yes. So here I am back at it again, helping people secure licenses, and then also helping them open their operations. And then I have cannabis licenses myself as well in a couple different markets.
So Sara C., tell us about about what you're doing in DC and what's it like in that kind of a market where the politicians just either seem to say stupid things or want to run scared when it comes to marijuana.
Well, I would say with CFCR, we're mostly focused on the regulation side of all of this too, which is basically what, when you get through legislation, regulation is the implementation of that. So we deal mostly with the FDA and some of the regulatory agencies, but we're closely watching things that are going on right now, like the Mace bill that just came out, which is the Nancy Mace released it the other day. It's sort of a response, the Republican response to the CAO bill, which was the Cannabis Administrative and Opportunity Act, which came out from Senators Wyden and Schumer and Booker. And so I think generally, the perception of the cannabis industry in Washington is becoming more and more favorable. There's a lot more understanding out there at this stage. And what we're really working to do is to understand some of the safety and research guidelines that the regulatory agencies will need in order to implement some of the standards in the future as we get towards, what is medical use cannabis, what is recreational use, and start to define some of those terms and build out the relationships that will really start to make that happen for the future and for the good of the industry.
So during our opener, we were chatting about the new Mace bill. And then we got more into New Jersey and some other issues. But what do you think about that bill? And what do you think about the prospects of whether it's going to get some momentum behind it?
Yeah, well, it's kind of in the same situation as CAO right now. In at least it's actually further ahead, and that it's gone to committee, which is standard process here. It's got right now. It only has 4 Republican sponsors, and Representative Mace, took a bit of a hit from her own party in South Carolina because she basically sponsored a bill that was not within the parameters of what her own party in the state would have liked to have seen. So she's going to face an uphill battle on that one for sure. But I think generally the industry is supportive of the bill because it does, to a certain extent, simplify some of the legal requirements around transitioning this from state to federal. And a lot of that comes down to, how the taxation's run on it, how some of the licensing is run on it, and the concerns of the industry are well reflected in it. And I think, she and her staff and her office had the advantage of seeing a lot of the comments come out too beforehand on the Democratic sponsored bill. So they were sort of able to take a little bit of that and start to walk a little bit of a bipartisan line on it. So, I think generally speaking, and this is not the position of CFCR per se, but I think the industry is supportive of the bill. We'll see where it goes, just because the government right now is we're about to go on a holiday. There's Washington slows to sort of glacial pace at times over things, but
Washington slows to glacial pace. Washington slows to subglacial pace. But I'm sorry.
We unfreeze every once in a while, but usually when it's around, increasing everyone's staff salaries. So, but I give her office a lot of credit for writing the bill. It's one of those things where you have to look at it and say, well, what are long-term unintended consequences? What does this do for small operators? What does it do for MSOs? What does it do for the big guys? You have to sort of just take a look at that across the board. And for a group like CFCR, we're mostly looking at, well, what does it do for health and safety? What does it do on opening up a lot of science and research on this? And then understanding how each of the agencies will be, I think, impacted by what they'll be called to do based on it. And the majority of the bill is focused on moving cannabis into something that's more along the lines of the wine industry, where a lot of the regulation goes to PTB. But the product health and safety side will still go to FDA.
I thought, for the highlights I saw, I thought were interesting. What really captured when I first heard of the bill, I yawned. I said, okay, here's another bill. It's probably ill-conceived. Then I heard some of the attributes and I was kind of impressed. But I said, a freshman Republican out of South Carolina, it's not going to go anywhere. And then it was either yesterday or today, Marijuana Moment gave the information about the backstory.
Yeah.
Backstory was just so incredibly powerful. Do you think, how much do you think the backstory is going to fuel that bill's keeping that bill in the public eye?
Well, I'll say 2 things. I had the chance to meet with Wyden and Mace both this week, and the background on the Wyden story is he's been at this a long time too, but he's coming at it from the perspective of somebody who's sort of influenced by his state and who's generally interested in the populist part of this. Her story, when you hear her say it and you hear her sort of in person sort of talking about it, is very compelling. And she's done, she's obviously had some PR prep around this and gotten sort of informed about how to present it. But it is very relatable for people. And you find that you get a lot of traction in DC and over these kind of bills when you can really make something both understandable and highly relatable and emotional for people. So she's definitely got the upper hand, I think, in that regard. And kudos to her for coming out with the story too, because it's very compelling.
Yeah, I think that story is going to compel it forward, because anybody who's going to ignore that story is either brain dead or heartless or both.
Yeah, and with all the women in the room too, it's a brave story to tell, and you feel for her when she really kind of comes forward with it, and so I think she's, I give her a lot of credit for having done that, and then I think the bill again has a potential to be a little bit more of a bipartisan player. But we'll see, you know, who actually signs on and sponsors it at the end of the day.
Yep. Terry, I don't want to monopolize things here. So do you want to jump in, or do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, no, I'd love to jump in.
Take it away.
So I would like to talk about what has been, well, two pet peeves and a problem, or one pet peeve and one problem. And you can see it by the numbers, which are shifting. Of just a couple of years ago, we had this really high percentage of female CEOs in cannabis, and everyone was, you know, patting themselves on the back how wonderful we did. And now no one can understand why they're all going away. And it's the most obvious thing, because the manipulation of social equity clauses, where everyone grabbed their wife or their friend and made them a head of a company, got a license, and then said, okay, here's 10 grand. Thanks. Bye. So that, you know, how do we solve that and actually find the women who don't have millions of dollars, who don't, you know, can't present with a man and woman's, you know, sheep's clothing type of thing, so to say. And then your own personal journeys, finding funding, because I could tell you, I was in front of a class and a student asked me this the other day, and I said, I've never gotten a penny from a pitch deck, from a meeting, from, you know, anyone, VC, any big investor. You should meet this guy. I'm going to put you in front of this person. None of them have ever given me a penny. And I've heard men who said, oh, I've been stopped halfway through my pitch. And they said, we've heard enough. How much do you need? You know? And I said, the only people who have ever given me a penny are people who saw me work, who I worked with. They realized, okay, she's dependable. She works harder than anyone in the room, probably. I could put faith, you know, I had to prove myself for so long before they invested in me. I wanted to see if your experiences were similar, and if you felt the tide was turning, and maybe what we can do about these problems of being female in cannabis.
Well, I'll jump in and say that the first thing is we need a lot of women who can be investors to be investors too at the same time, who really come forward and put together these, you know, foundations and pools of money, and who sort of, you know, just sort of step forward at this stage too, because there's a lot of money that's circulating around from female investment, and we're not seeing it. So they really do have to step up to the plate and kind of match the big boys here at this stage. And I don't know why there's a hesitancy to do that. And I can't speak to it, but my experiences in raising capital for media ventures and things that I've done before in my career are very similar to yours. And women, we are tasked to prove ourselves more than men are. And I don't know why that is, because I think consistently across the board, we outperform. And you will have people like Warren Buffett and some of the biggest names in investing say, you know, yeah, always put a woman in the CEO, because your margins will be better. Your bottom line is going to improve across the board. And that's, you know, data proves that that's true. So it boggles the mind why men are still put into the leadership positions that they are. No offense to David in the room here, because he's
no offense taken. Just
great moderator.
On the other part of my life, I do consulting in the engineering sector, and Asia, different kind of engineering than I think what you're doing, more like people who build roads, bridges, buildings, that sort of thing. And oddly enough, I have a lot of clients that are female. So I do a lot with women-owned business enterprises. And as I'm fond of saying, men and women are, as much as people like to say, oh, men and women are equal, they're not. They're balanced. Women have strengths that men don't have, and men have other strengths that women don't have. They kind of balance out. You take at least I'll say this for the engineering sector. And I've said, and I don't mind saying it on the air, because I've shared this with female CEOs. You take a man and a woman CEO and put them in a race to get to a certain point in time, 3 years down the road, the man will get there faster. But the woman, when she shows up, won't be too much further behind, and her team will be in way better shape. She'll have more of the original staff. She'll have higher morale, and the company will be in generally better shape for it, because the women, just by nature, are more concerned about the social aspect. You know, the herding of the cats, the care and feeding of the staff, and the guys are just concerned about, we got to get the project done, whatever the cost is. And it's not completely that way, but that's generally what I've seen. And I deal with a lot of female CEOs of pretty impressive engineering firms, many of them in the Southwest, but around the country. So there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. I think some of it has to do, you know, some of the fundraising, you know, there's 4 or 5 times in this show today that I've been tempted to blurt things out. I'm working on a project with a local attorney up here, and we're bringing in 8 social equity applicants to start a retail store in an exceptionally great location. And one of the ways that we've made this work is when investors are looking at social equity applicants, and this isn't a female or a male thing, they're looking at somebody they don't know. And now what they have to do is invest with them. And like our rules in Massachusetts are, the SC has to control the business. So you got somebody who's going to come in and write a 7-figure check, and they get a little hesitant about, I've got one person here who has to have all the absolute control. We were able, when we realized that was one of the hesitancies on investor parts, we put together a team of 8 people who collectively have control, but now you don't have to worry about one person on a whim saying, this is the way we're going to do it. And the investor worrying about, there goes all my money. And I think there's going to be some new structures that'll come out from innovative people in New Jersey, innovative people in New York, because New York is a huge state, that may begin to shift some of that. We clearly need to shift the paradigm on not just for females, but social equity and smaller entrepreneurs. Otherwise, this industry will end up looking like either alcohol or tobacco or pharma, run by a lot of big companies.
I can, 1 second. I love that idea, David. In New Jersey, I know, especially if you have a social equity license, you're only allowed to own one. And it's a problem so much as you can't even have profit sharing if you're an employee at another company. It's complete, halt on other ownership. So when you're saying, did you take 8 people who each had a dream and took 8 licenses and then gave them a fraction of each? So is that how that worked?
No, I'll explain it to you. Here's what we did.
Yeah, briefly.
We found a great opportunity. We had tried to work something with a single social equity applicant who was going to be the 51%. And then at one point, the SC said to us, I'm the CEO, the buck stops with me, and that's the way it is. And we looked at each other like, how are we going to raise money when an investor needs to know they're going to get their money back? And this person is like, it's going to be my way or the highway. And that's when we said, you know what we need to do is make this so statistically it'll work. If we get let me slow down. If you have 10% or more ownership, you're considered an individual of control. So we wanted to make sure that these individuals were under the 10% limit. We have a 3 license cap in Massachusetts per license type, but you can be involved in as many licenses as long as you're under 10% and you're not exerting control. So we designed it we brought together 8 people. Now I'm going to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole. My fiance was one of the lead trainers in the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Social Equity Program. So she and I did a lot of the business training. So I got to know, and I tend to give a lot of my time. So I became a mentor and a coach to a lot of people. So when we went to put this together, Blake knew a lot of people. He's one of the top licensing folks in the state, and probably the only one that gives a regular discount to social equity applicants. We just kind of sat down and said, okay, who do we know? And they have to be within Boston because they have to qualify for the City of Boston Social Equity Program. And we came up with about 15 names within about 10 minutes. Put together, sent an email to everybody, figuring if we're lucky, maybe 6 or 7 would say yes. And I was shocked. Everybody said yes. Our big problem then was to cull it down to a group of 8. And a lot of these people are folks I've known for 3 years now. They've gotten screwed by investors. One of them, I refer to him as the king of short sticks because he keeps getting the short end of the stick. Landlords have taken advantage of him. People have tried to exploit his social equity status, that sort of thing. So our plan is we put the 8 together. They owned 51%. We were then able to say to an investor, you don't have the risk of the SCs just doing something crazy, because not all 8 of them are going to go along with a crazy idea. These are smart people. One of them's got a PhD and works at Harvard. I mean, this is not, there's a perception. There's also a perception in the market. As soon as you say social equity, everybody goes, oh, the social equity crowd. I understand. And then you get somebody who's going to write a check, and then they become a little bit more suspect. When we began to explain the background, we got the investor to meet the team. The investor became very comfortable. And in the wildest of things, a number of things happened with our project to drive the costs down. And the investor kept saying, I want to put more money in. I want a bigger stake of this. And we kept telling them, we don't need as much money. But we got the deal put together because we have the 8 SCs. The plan is instead of conspiring quietly, hey, Sara, let's get together and start our own business. We could do this ourselves. We want you to do that. Pair up, tell us, let us know how you can help. And at the appropriate time, we're going to accumulate profit, cash profit in the company. We'll use that to buy you out. We'll help you get your next business started. And then we're going to bring another social equity applicant in. And now, because of the work I do in the engineering sector, is a lot of work around ownership transition planning. I know how to do those kind of programs and design them. So that helped us out. So we've got 8 folks. We've already had one person leave the team because they didn't qualify. So we had to bring somebody else in. But we've got 8 folks who will own 51%. As we get closer to the store opening, they're assuming more and more control, because Blake and I we're the transactional people trying to get all the pieces put together and make sure we can get the store set. And the team is taking care of a lot of the decisions about how the store is going to run, and that sort of thing. And they all know if they want to leave, just tell us in advance so we can plan and we can help you launch out. And then if they want to stay involved, we figure out how that happens, or hopefully they go out and they get their own license. And realistically, while we originally pitched it that all 8 of them would go out either in pairs or some other combination and get licensed, some of them are going to stay with it, I can tell. But that's cool. And the investor likes it. We've got some politicians involved who like it. We've pre-screened it with the Cannabis Control Commission. They think it's an interesting concept, so they're willing to. I think they're looking favorably on it, especially since social equity in Massachusetts has been, generally speaking, an adjunct failure. They just can't get traction, right? The amount of SCs we have licensed. So we're really looking to break that. And for Blake and I, we will have a minority position in a really cool store. And we're going to be able to say, look what we did. I mean, if we do a really good job, maybe Chris Walsh will say, we want to put you on a podium and let you guys explain to the industry how to do it in maybe, late 2022 or 2023. But we're really excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, don't feel bad. I mean, social equity in most states has been a abject disaster. So anything that can kind of improve upon it, alternative ideas are super exciting. Sara G, I wanted to ask you, so you said you're a multiple license holder. So how many licenses are you involved in? And were you a minority stake? Was it any way that they were involving you for social equity reason? Were these things you headed up on your own? What was that journey?
So my journey has been a little bit easier to acquire licenses, not being like your traditional investor, because I had the company that I could leverage. So, if somebody was going for a woman-owned business, or if somebody was going for a minority business, I usually could qualify. Some states I don't qualify for a minority, just women.
Can I ask what your ethnic background is?
Well, I'm American, I'm Norwegian, but some of the states basically do not consider women a minority. They have their own qualification, which is just women. So it's definition. It's the same thing. And so, some of the projects they wanted a discount, or some of the projects we just liked each other enough that it was like, okay, let's do this together. And since we do also help people open their facilities, people would look at me or the firm as, oh, okay, well, this is going to kind of help get us along. So I have North Dakota, Nevada, Ohio, and Michigan. And those are all very different percentages. They're from projects that I put together with my groups and just kind of spearheaded them, all the way down to one of the projects was a thank you for winning the license, which, I mean, I didn't know people that nice existed, right? And it wasn't a big percentage, but it's nice, So they know they can call me anytime and I can help them solve any of their problems. Or I can try at least. And so my journey to a license holder, it was one of those things that I was, self-funded, and I bootstrapped my business, and I, didn't really probably have a lot of business acumen in my early days. And, it was one of those things that I looked at my clients as, they were such a big deal because they had this. And then it's like, I know how to do it. Why don't I just go do it? And I think when I got that confidence in myself, then, the sky's kind of the limit. I haven't applied for myself for the last couple of years, but I plan on doing so in some of the markets that are upcoming, just because I have my hands full with other stuff.
All right. I need to jump in for a minute. It's just after the top of the hour. We got to take our 5 o'clock break. We're going to be right back on the Green Rush. We're not going to let our guests go. I think this conversation could keep going on. While we're taking our break, we're going to see who we have in the waiting room and figure out how we fit more people onto the screen, because this is a great show. Stick with us. We're going to be right back.
Difference is building a solution for that individual, not just a custom, here's a box, here's a video, here's how you make your VMS. We custom design and custom build every situation for exactly what the customer needs. And we keep the costs low. We have multiple tiers, as far as what you're looking at on the cost side of things. If you want a one-time, where you just pay one initial cost, we have that. If you want to maintain your system and have the highest protection and highest capabilities and highest upgrades at all times, we have different plans for you. But we scale it so it's scalable and affordable 100%.
Pro Cannabis Media programming and PCM TV is supported by Revolutionary Clinics, Massachusetts' #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry. And by Artery Pay, easy, cheap, fun, and legal, just like cannabis should be.
So I think there's one very important difference between me and most of my team members and other cannabis accounting firms, especially outsourced cannabis accounting firms. With a lot of the other firms, you're going to find bookkeepers or folks that were accountants for their entire career, but they were junior accountants. I've spent most of my career alongside CFOs at public companies, companies with thousands of employees, public companies. So much of my career wasn't spent in the debits and credits. It was spent with the CFO, CEO, COO of large public companies, working on strategy, working on planning and big initiatives, working on projects such as mergers and integrations. So that high level experience, along with being able to do the debits and credits and having members of my team that also have fairly senior experience and also members of the team that are junior and can do the bookkeeping at a little bit lower cost than some of the people with the experience, gives our clients a much broader depth of experience than a lot of the other firms where you're hiring someone that is just a bookkeeper and can't help with the strategy side of it, or someone that's been an executive for a long time and can only help with the strategy but can't help with the hands-on.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the Green Rush. I'm David Rabinovitz, your host. I'm happily joined for this episode by Misu from New Jersey. We're talking with powerful women in weed. It's been a great show, a phenomenal conversation. We went through the first half-hour panel so quick, we actually went past the top of the hour. We've got two more great entrepreneurs who are joining us, Jill Ellsworth and Brooke Westfield. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a moment. We had a couple of questions in the chat about Asia Atwood's product. You can find information on that at Trella.io, TRELLA.io. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to my co-host, Tara.
Hello. Well, so we have the Saras already have been talking, and that's been awesome. So let's talk about Jill and Brooke. If you ladies could just briefly introduce yourself and what you do in the industry.
Sure. My name is Jill Ellsworth. I am the founder and CEO of Willow Industries. So here at Willow, we have developed the cannabis kill step. We invented a technology called the Willow Pure that cleans cannabis. It's Simply put, we use ozone gas to get rid of any sort of pathogen on finished flower. Yeast, mold, E. coli, salmonella, bacteria, ensuring that cultivators have a solution to contamination within a cultivation. But most importantly, it's all about consumer safety.
Wow, cool. Brooke?
Hi, my name is Brooke Westlake. I am the owner and founder of Women in Cannabis Expo, and I also am opening a testing lab, and we are launching an e-commerce website. But with the Expo, we just had our first one this last year, and we are having 4 of them in 2022. And with the Expo, we really gear it towards bringing women and businesses together. So women who are in this business or women who want to go into the business have the opportunity to connect and network, and we lift each other up. We provided scholarships as well as awards this year. So
That's awesome. I think someone reached out to me about that. What was your first location and what are the next 3 going to be?
yeah, so our first location we had in Reno, Nevada. We were set and scheduled to have our event in 2020, but due to COVID, we had to postpone it out a year. So we had our event September 27th through the 29th at the Atlantis Hotel and Casino in Reno, Nevada. In 2022, we're going to be doing them pretty much quarterly. So March, we're going to be in New Jersey. June, we're going to be in Denver. September, we'll be in Las Vegas. And then in December, the very early month of December, we will be in San Francisco.
Oh, let me know if you have anything with the Jersey one. That's where I'm at.
And I'm in Denver, so happy to join.
You are too,
Perfect.
you said? You're in Denver.
Yeah,
Okay,
we're in
cool.
Denver.
So
Yeah.
this is interesting. This is something I hope, David, you're okay with me asking this. I always wonder if other women feel this way. And since I have so many smart, capable women here, let me ask it. As far as women's panels go, and now so far as an entire women's expo, I have mixed feelings on like that, because I definitely want there to be a safe space and to create a space where women can engage with each other. But then sometimes I feel it's almost used as a tool to take women off the main stage, or to feel like, oh, we don't have to worry about making an equitable panel. Let's just put Tara on the women's panel and then we can just pluck whoever we want for the main stage. Do you feel that? For me, I'd rather just be on a panel because of my expertise, not my gender. But I do see also the need, because some people don't do the right thing, to have these separate spaces. What is everyone's feeling on that? Participating in woman-specific topics or areas versus just general cannabis?
I tend to, go ahead.
But I was just going to say, one of the things that we did for our panels, which was really, I think, I sent out a survey for all the speakers and asked them to rate the panels 1 through 3, 1 being the one they liked the most, 3 being the one they liked the least. And then what we did was we did an Instagram drawing live for who made those panels as a way of transparency, so that everybody got an equal shot at being on a panel that maybe they felt more passionate about. And most of the speakers, so some speakers didn't get to be on a panel because they didn't make the cut, being their name wasn't drawn out of the bucket that we did. But that's one way that we felt would be more of an equal way to do it.
Oh, I like that. I've had people call me and say, we're between 2 panels on you. Which one would you like to do? And there's definitely things I'm more passionate about than others. So I really like that. Sarah C, what were you going to say?
I was to amplify that. I think that's a great idea. I like to see mixed panels myself, and as a woman, I like to participate on them where it's not just sort of female centric. Although I do like situations like this where you have sort of behind the scenes webinars where we can all kind of gather together in our little girls clubs and talk about.
No one is listening. It's just us.
Yeah, but that's the same with what the guys do too. They get together and they chat in the locker room or whatever. Not to be too sexist there, but there's a lot of back and forth that happens offline, and women tend to not always do that in a business sense, right? We don't always get together and talk about these things like, kind of brass tacks. And I like those kind of panels where you can get in there or webinars or things and collectively get a group of women together. And one group that does it really well, I'll shout out to them, is the Women's Inclusion Network at ArcView. they do a really good job of like collating great speakers of women who are experts in their area, who have been professionals across the board, and getting sort of a diverse group of people to talk about not only the cannabis industry, but, you know, law and regulation, entrepreneurship, media, and they kind of splice that all together into a really, really nice, well done panel. But I think when you have events that are too focused on trying to get like, we have to have this many women on a panel and this, you know, and it as a female, like I like to have, you know, sort of equal representation on things. I think that's important, but the all female led discussions or all female led events, they don't teach us how to deal with men. They don't teach us how to deal in the real world, where you're not just talking to a group of women, because, you know, we're very good about advocating and amplifying ourselves, but when we are in a situation with men, we don't always do that. And we have to learn how to do that situationally.
I feel fortunate to come from a very large, obnoxious family. So I learned how to talk over people at a young age. And I think that's a great skill for any woman to hone. So yeah, you're right. We can't amplify something if you're the only person in the room, because if you don't have someone who relates to your experience to be a sounding board, how are we ever going to commiserate and really have a mission? So it is that balance. I think, Jill, you were either swatting a fly or you wanted to speak.
Oh, something in my face. Sorry.
Oh, there was. Okay.
But yeah, but I will also comment on this. Listen, I definitely prefer mixed gendered panels. I think they certainly elevate women in this industry that is definitely male dominated. However, on the other end, right before this, I was on a call with a group of women in cannabis, and the group is called Women in Cannabis. And it's a really great platform and, safe space for a bunch of women to get together and talk about, how are you feeling on the mixed panels? Are you having your voice heard? And, and talking about just, exactly, Sarah, what you were talking about, how do we show up in situations like that as our most powerful self. And so yeah, but it's wonderful to commiserate with women and make sure that we're all connected that way.
Yeah. And to your point, Jill, too, and the connection part of that, when you have too many all female events or all female sort of centric ones, we don't have the chance then to connect with other men, like with men, right? And we don't get the chance to sort of build those relationships and those bridges that we need to do, because we start to accidentally sort of confine ourselves to our own gender. And at the same time, we don't find, people like David here who are advocates for us and who can really sort of help move the needle in a good direction. So I think it's important that part of the reason why these are mixed gendered and very diverse events are good is that you open up that exposure and that connectivity with everybody else, as opposed to just women being sort of like, oh, we're gonna back into our own little safe zone here and not kind of go out of it, which is really detrimental to us at the end of the day.
Brooke, yeah, I want to hear what you have to say, and I also have a question, so you could jam them together if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So I have just quickly. I've spoken at 5 out of 6, the 5 of the past 6 weeks. I've spoken at conferences, so I have just been insane. And I think there's a very standard lineup. Okay, this panel will be there, this seminar will be there, this booth will be. You get it. But to have something that's entirely women focused, which would be women speakers, women booths, women businesses, probably much more amplified. Is there, and what you want to say in response, start with that, but then also follow with, is there something that you see is a topic, an area, a concentration that your conference has that is not, reflected in mixed gender conferences?
So the first thing I was going to say was mentioning something that Sara had talked about, is that what we did was we had phone calls from men and they asked, could we attend your conference? And we were like, absolutely, because we can learn something from you guys. It's not just that we are women focused, but we want to learn and grow together. And so we did have male speakers as well. We didn't just have most of our panel were female, but we did have male speakers and we had some male companies that were there. And one of our biggest supporters and sponsors was a male-owned company. He said, I was raised by a single mom and 3 sisters, and I will back you guys all day long. And I was like, thank you. We appreciate that. And we had very diverse women. I mean, one of the women, it's the Chamber of Cannabis. It's a company in Nevada. And they spoke about what it is to work with men and how to work collaboratively together and how to be successful at it. And I felt like that was so wonderful to have that presentation at our expo. You know, for panels, I think that what was the question that you had asked? You had said
kind of like, is there a different topic, a different focus, a different bit? Do you see that people have different needs or wants of what they expect from your convention versus a typical one?
Yeah, I think the first thing was we just needed to get the first one off the ground. And being that we had to promote it for a year and 9 months, that was a lot of legwork, which was fabulous. And the outcome of what we had was great. The thing that I think that we could have more of is the biggest thing that I think keeps coming up is money, is how do these women who want to go into this industry attain money, or an investor or an angel investor, because you can't go to a bank. And the other issue that comes up is with investors, they typically want data, they want numbers, they want you to show them like, oh, I've already sold this, this, and this. But that, are you putting the cart before the horse before the cart? Like, how do they do that if they have this really great idea? And so I think that's a big missing puzzle piece, is that it's smart for investors, obviously, to be very careful about where they put their money. But at the same time, you can't really expect, especially in this industry, for a woman to come forward and be like, oh yeah, this is the company I want to have, and here's all these numbers. Especially if their state is new to adopting it, they're typically not going to have something like this. So I think money tends to be the first giant hurdle that we are all kind of maneuvering through and trying to figure out. And that seems to be the one thing that continues to come up with any woman that I've spoken to in this industry.
Yeah, that's such a great point, because we talked about this earlier, actually, in regards to women not getting funded. And I said, the only time I've ever gotten funded was not from a pitch deck, nothing like that. It's from when I worked side by side with someone for a long time. And they finally said like, wow, you're smart, you're a hard worker. You know, I had to prove myself. And Asia, who was on the call earlier, or wait, was it one of the Saras? One of you said, we have to prove ourselves so much more. Why is it that? Why can't? Because I said, I've had men who tell me they get stopped mid-presentation. They say, how much do you need? So we don't have that. But what a blanket people hide behind is, oh, well, you don't have sales. You're not proven. You don't have a track record. I'm going to go with this guy who was selling whatever widget last year, and he took a company public. So he must know more about making money than you, who's been in cannabis for 10 years, So it's something like that. And then it's also, is there a man who wants to speak? Yes, David.
I want to figure out how to say this without crossing any improper lines. But if any of you ladies have ever been tried to picked up by a man, you know that many times what men say are exaggerations. So when a guy says, oh, they stopped me in the middle of my presentation, what they probably did was stop him in the middle of his last word. But because it was in the middle of something, it kind of gets stretched to in the middle of the presentation to give him the money. It may have been the third meeting, right? So don't necessarily glom on to like, oh, it's because it's a guy, they're just going to rake the money in. Because I've seen, you get these quote unicorn type things, right? Somebody comes in because they've done it many times and they're polished, and they have to bring somebody on who knows the investor. When we raised the opportunity that we were talking about earlier, the social equity opportunity, we had a lot of people interested in low dollar amounts who loved the concept, and once they heard where we were going to be, really wanted to be part of it. The investor who stepped in and wanted to write the check was quick, not because it was us. It's because we had a connection through him, and because he knew somebody that knew us, we were able to trade on that credibility. So bear in mind, it isn't just, oh, because it's a guy, the money happens. It's men are willing to take far more risks and sometimes stretch situations more than women are. I'm not saying that's good. And
disagree on that. Disagree that men take more risks. I take
Tara,
okay.
Let me say men are willing to do more stupid things than women are. How's that? Right?
Still disagree.
I mean, yes, no. Okay. I guess
Tara. No. But wait, just let me respond, David. I do entirely agree with you. You're right. Men exaggerate. It could be complete bullshit. I have had that response before. And, but I do feel I know a lot of brilliant women who just can't find money. And I know a lot of idiot men who just get more money thrown at them and they just keep losing it. So, there's always exceptions and, but, I'm sorry. So everyone else wants to speak. Sara and, Jill, whoever says it first, go.
Sara, go ahead.
Okay. So I wouldn't normally share something like this personal, but I was literally on a call like a half hour before this, and it's with a group. They funded half the project, and the real estate half of the project fell on the group of guys. And I'm doing the operational side of things. And it's like a couple $100,000, no big deal. And they've asked to see my portfolio. They wanted B-roll. They wanted all of these things. And I'm like, I'm moving quick. Like, I don't have time to like create B-roll of all the dispensaries and cultivation facilities and things like that we've opened. But like, here's links to a bunch of them. And a lot of my links disappear because a lot of the brands that we build are built to sell. And so you know who picks those up: Harvest, Truly, GTI, Cresco. So some of my links now have become dead end. And so I wanted to talk about, you know, one of my best projects that we activated 4 years ago, and it sold for 22 million to, you know, the largest company in cannabis. And it's like, well, no, like we need those things though. And I'm like, if my company that I helped build and the brand that we helped started translated into the sale, where this big major brand could buy only one in the entire state, and they bought it, I think it was in like 3 years for 22 million. Like, I don't know what else I can say to you guys right now. Like, if the proof isn't in the pudding there, like, I don't know how else I can communicate this message. And it's so frustrating because, you know, I don't like to like pair the women in med thing because, like everybody's mentioned, it takes all of us to make the industry tick, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that that's the best way to like, you know, describe it, and so that all voices are heard. And 13 years later, I've been in the industry. I'm the expert at this. It's still like, well, show me. And I'm like, one of my business partners was like getting a little aggravated, and he's like, just Google her. And I'm like, you know, but you don't want to say that. So it's just such a strange thing. And I will say that a lot of times, like, I have minority partners, and that's why we kind of partner together, women and the minority, and they're men. And a lot of times I'm like, you guys just have the conversation. And it's not because I'm not capable. It's not because I don't know my numbers, not because I don't know my industry. It's just that much easier.
Jill, you had something to add?
Yeah, I mean, I've raised a lot of money in this industry. I will tell you, like, I will say how challenging it was. And that I'm still most of the time the only female in the room. I mean, I raised $2 million in 2019. I'm just finishing up our Series A, which is, you know, tripling that number. But again, I mean, I'm most of these investors, and they're all cannabis VCs. Most of their only female portfolio companies. The only one in these rooms. And it was like a massive learning curve. I mean, I didn't go to business school. I'm an entrepreneur, you know? And so like I had to quickly learn the lingo. But yeah, I mean, to the point, it's been hard for me to do this. But I think once I like really garnered that knowledge and power, like I was able to go kick ass.
Can I just, leave this for one moment and ask you about your technology? Because it does sound super interesting. Two things that popped in my head was, isn't ozone bad, and aren't we trying to reduce it? And second, is this something bad operators could manipulate and take plants that are moldy and, shouldn't be used, and then dose it with this? Or is that what it's meant for salvaging something that's unusable?
Well, so I'll start with the first question. So this is definitely different than the ozone layer. So ozone gas is 3 molecules. It's essentially made from oxygen. So it's oxygen that's then gone through an electrical charge, and it adds this O negative, and so it turns into O3. So we make ozone from oxygen within our system. And then to the second question, it's definitely meant to clean flower that has been exposed to pathogens. So whether it's mold or yeast or any of those potential contaminants that, one, could make a cultivator fail testing, but two, could be dangerous for consumer. Yes, we can get rid of that, but it does not get rid of systemic contamination. So if this product is like horribly contaminated, no, our system does not get rid of that. And that should not be sold. What ours is essentially a kill step. which all of your food, all of your beverages go through a kill step. And that is exactly what ours is. And so it's essentially the icing on the cake to a very, very clean growing cycle. You have clean cannabis. You want to just make sure it's, definitely going to pass testing and it has a longer shelf life. And that's what our systems are intended for. But you better believe cultivators have wanted to, put through the grossest weed and hope that they pass.
I would believe that. David, I do feel like we were co-hosts though. So is there anything you want to hop in with? I mean, I'm having a lot of fun doing this, but
I'm still trying to digest the leather from the last foot I put in my mouth.
the leather? What?
I said, I'm still trying to digest the leather from the last foot I put in my mouth. So I don't think I want to say anything else.
Wait,
but
No, I'm just teasing. You're doing great. Keep going. I think it's a great conversation.
Oh no, I was just kidding with you about the
I knew you were only kidding. No,
Okay.
I think it's a great conversation. Keep going. Remember, we got a break at the bottom of the hour, which is only 3 minutes away. Then we bring a couple of more guests in. But just like we did last time, this has been a great panel. And keep going. And when we go into the break, we'll talk about if people who are on this panel want to stay in for the last half hour.
Okay. So
I've got to jump at 5:30, but I wanted to point out something about risk, which is important here because you've all mentioned it in one variation or the other. Men do take more risks than women. And that's one of the reasons why they underperform in the corporate setting sometimes, because it's like, all right, I'm going to bet it all on double jeopardy. And they bet it all and it takes a nosedive and it's a really bad game to play. Whereas women tend to be more risk adverse, but because of that, we have higher return.
Interesting. The only reason I said that is because I just know people have said to me, I think the reason men dominated the cannabis industry early is because they're less risk averse. They are idiots. They're not worried about getting arrested or going to jail and stuff like that. And Sara, you're one of the few women who I'm 12 years, you're 13 years in. And I said, I think it's my lack of that gene of why I've jumped out of a plane, of why I played rugby, of just not being risk adverse and doing stupid things. So it was a joke really about myself that I seem to be lacking, but you're right. Probably it is a female gene, better for our survival in some way. And I'm probably just missing it.
There are more boys born every year than there are girls, right? Here's a couple of statistics. There are more boys born every year than girls, but by the time you get to the end of the race, there are more women still living than men.
Huh. That's interesting.
Right? When you hear about the kid who got hit by a train because they were playing on the track, it's very unlikely that it was the girl who was playing chicken with a train.
Fair. Okay, so we have 1 minute. Let me ask a really quick question, I think, and we can continue it after the break if you want. What is the first thing that pops in your head? Because I know it's rare that there's another woman in the room, at least for me, when I go into a boardroom, a meeting, something. If there is another woman, usually I'm surprised. What's the first thought that goes in your head when you're like, oh, wow, there's 2 women in the room today? Anyone?
To me, like just even coming in here, it was exciting. This is only really my second experience with a lot of women in the meeting session like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always like excited about it and great. There's more women in this industry that are being exposed to participating with us and us participating with them. So it's always exciting to me because like I said, this is only the second time that I've come into a meeting room and there's like more women in here than I expected. And I think it's wonderful.
Awesome.
I think automatically someone to build a bridge with, like, all right, there's a person who's got some background and situations in common. Let's build this bridge. Let's make that happen right now.
Yeah, I would say surprised as well, Tara, but I would also say there's like this underlying sense of support. It's like, oh, I got you, we got each other.
All right. So that is 5:30, David. We're
going to take a break right now. It's our typical bottom of the hour break. We're here on the Green Rush Friday afternoon. We do this every week. Stick with us. We're going to be right back. We got a couple more panelists who are going to join us. And during the break, we're going to figure out who's going to stay with us for the last half hour. We'll be right back.
Pro Cannabis Media Programming and PCM TV is supported by Revolutionary Clinics, Massachusetts' #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry. And by Artery Pay. Easy, cheap, fun, and legal, just like cannabis should be.
Difference is building a solution for that individual. Not just a custom, here's a box, here's a video, here's how you make your VMS. We custom design and custom build every situation for exactly what the customer needs. And we keep the cost low. We have multiple tiers, as far as what you're looking at on the cost side of things. If you want a one-time, where you just pay one initial cost, we have that. If you want to maintain your system and have the highest protection and highest capabilities and highest upgrades at all times, we have different plans for you. But we scale it so it's scalable and affordable 100%.
So I think there's one very important difference between me and most of my team members and other cannabis accounting firms, especially outsourced cannabis accounting firms. With a lot of the other firms, you're going to find bookkeepers or folks that were accountants for their entire career, but they were junior accountants. I've spent most of my career alongside CFOs at public companies with thousands of employees, public companies. So much of my career wasn't spent in the debits and credits. It was spent with the CFO, CEO, COO of large public companies, working on strategy, working on planning and big initiatives, working on projects such as mergers and integrations. So that high
Hi, I am Sasha Perlman, co-founder of The Stone Age, the premier cannabis experience in New York City and possibly the world. We are very much the intersection of cannabis culture, art, advocacy, and experience. And we're very excited for our flagship here in the heart of Manhattan, the heart of Chelsea, this beautiful 10,000 square foot exhibit that features a lot of really incredible things. The first thing that you'll see is this beautiful botanical assortment, female-founded brand out of Jersey City, Larkspur Botanicals. So all of the people who have worked on the space are local to the tri-state area. The next stage of arousal is plateau. Plateau is really the precipice right before that magical moment happens, where the culmination of all of the anticipation, excitement come together. So the next stage of arousal is excitement. Excitement is where the heart starts bumping faster, the pupils start dilating. This is all art by Anna Seibel. It's a blacklight room, really dope creation. When designing the Stone Age, we structured it around states of being because regardless of your relationship with cannabis, states of being are shared universally human experiences. Your first stage is arousal. Arousal is split into 4 stages, first starting in anticipation and then moving into excitement. Come with us to find that magical moment where you surrender to the pleasure, be present to the bliss, coming into the space where the body finally meets that magical moment. This sculpture is a reflection of the culmination of arousal. It's by a local artist named Jason Krugman out of Brooklyn. And the dimming and brightening of the sculpture really symbolizes that moment of rest, recovery, rejuvenation, finally coming back into your body.
Hey, thanks for hanging with us. We're back. It's Friday afternoon here in the Green Rush Live, and we've got a couple more guests. Couple had to leave, but we're going to wrap up the next half hour if we get it through in a half hour, because we've had great conversations with some really powerful women in weed. And as a result, we're kind of running a little bit late, but that's the beauty of operating in marijuana time. The clock doesn't always move like it does when you're on network TV, and being on the internet, we can always stretch it out a little bit. So stick with us. We got some more great discussions happening, and I'm going to pass it back to Tara, who's been doing a great job introducing our guests and keeping the conversation going. So take it away, Tara. Just let me know when you want me to jump in.
Awesome, David. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So we are being joined by Meg Sanders now, who I'm meeting for the first time today, and Sasha Perlman, who I've been on her podcast and it was fantastic. So, Meg, Sara, can you both just tell the audience a little bit about yourselves?
Sure. My name is Meg Sanders. I'm the CEO of Canna Provisions here in Lee, Massachusetts, as well as Holyoke and Sheffield. Our grow is in Sheffield. And I've been in the industry since 2009, started in Colorado, was the CEO of Mindful for what feels like, 70 years, but it was only 7. And then consulted quite a bit around the United States. And now here I am living in Lee, Massachusetts, building cannabis again.
Very cool. Sasha?
Hi there. I'm Sasha Perlman, co-founder of the Stone Age. We are an immersive cannabis museum located in the heart of Chelsea, New York. We just opened doors October 1st, and our space is really dedicated to education, advocacy, and artistry. So it's a non-consumption event space, but it's really teaching mass market on the efficacy of plant medicine wellness and touching on really important topics, including the opioid epidemic, as well as social justice and sexual wellness.
Very cool. I wanted to come by after CWCB. I'd planned to, but I ended up skipping the whole conference because I was actually too busy to get away that day. But that's fantastic. I've heard really good things about it. So Meg, Sasha, you're both in New York. That's cool. We have kind of an East Coast panel. And for those of you, if you don't know Brooke, she runs the Women's Cannabis Expo, which I guess the East Coast one will be in New Jersey. So maybe you have to come to New Jersey and say hi to me to see her. But very cool. So Meg, what's it been like? So how many female cannabis dispensary owners do you know in New York? There's one that's very big and well known for being women owned, but there are a lot of women running operations that we don't hear about, like yourself.
Yeah, and I'm in Massachusetts actually. I'm not
you're
in New York.
Mass.
Yeah.
I thought he was showing me the Mass New York border, and you were on the New York side.
No, I'm on the Mass side, which is why we have so many New York visitors, because I'm just a few miles from the border, so it's kind of easy. But we're also the gateway of the Berkshires here in Lee. It's everybody that comes to the Berkshires has to drive right by us. So it's pretty cool.
Very cool.
But yeah, okay. So women owned or women led, there are actually quite a few businesses, and definitely they do not get the shout outs here in Massachusetts that maybe they should, of course. And I would say Caroline Pino right now, who I am just a huge fan of. She's in Haverhill. And she's fighting the power, doing her thing, making sure that the town can't take advantage of this silly kind of payola thing we have, which is called a host community agreement. And there's impact fees from that, because every time we open a dispensary, how negative and how many horrible things happen. Not ever. So in Massachusetts, they kind of created this, and regardless, her town has taken advantage of it. And I'm just right behind her. She's suing the big guy, and I'm just like, go get him, girl. So she's phenomenal. I absolutely adore her. And there's so many other women like her in Massachusetts, as well as, in national and international companies like Bang Chocolate, my very dear friend, Jamie Pearson. We could go on and on about some really incredible women, but definitely we don't get the airtime that the men seem to do. So.
Well, actually, I know her. I haven't talked to her before COVID. She opened up near the Berkshires, right? Up there.
Jamie?
Carolyn.
Oh, Carolyn. No, Caroline Pino, she's in Haverhill. Yeah.
I don't know Mass that well. Okay, but very cool. Sasha, kind of a similar question. So I know there's a lot of kind of like speakeasy consumption spaces, experiences, things like that. Have you felt that you are just opening a experience for everyone, or did being a woman and having events, because I do get, I think, the emails for Stone Age, and I see some of them are very kind of female wellness focused. Do you feel like you're catering to your own market a little bit more, or is it just completely general everyone?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think the Stone Age is very much for everyone, and we've certainly seen a spectrum of attendees come and have the experience, and that ranges from, you know, people in their early 20s to people in their late 70s. And the intention behind what we created and the information is really, whether or not you're kind of curious or you're a cannabis expert, there really is something for everybody there, which is really unique and special. We've had tremendous support from the women in cannabis, which is really exciting. And some of the events that we've done, like we just did a collaboration with Etain, House of Puff, and we had a Women in Weed, where we had kind of all of the cannabis queens of the Stone Age in one space, which was really beautiful. The cannabis community in New York is really, really supportive and just kind of comes together to support one another. One of the highlights that we have in our gift shop is actually we do a rotation of female and minority owned brands, pretty exclusive to like New York, New Jersey area, that pop up on a biweekly rotation. So we very much, as a female and minority owned brand, support that and kind of extend ourselves to make sure that it's inclusive of that. But the space and the experience itself is really for everyone. And that is very much how we intended it to be, because we want to educate mass market conscious consumers as legalization continues to spread through the country.
Very cool. Are you looking to do this as a temporary kind of pop-up space, or do you want this to be a permanent fixture?
So we intended it to be a temporary pop-up. However, we've received such demand from industry partners in the community to become more of a permanent fixture. So hopefully that becomes the reality. Certainly going to keep me in New York a lot longer than I had anticipated. But we really see New York as being the hub for cannabis tourism, maybe taking the reins from California and Colorado and moving it to really the epicenter of the world, which is New York. And we very much want to pop up in other markets, such as Massachusetts and Chicago and Atlanta, and kind of these more metropolitan markets, really, ideally become a global sort of brand. But with, I think, the right folks in place from a partner perspective, this could very much be a permanent exhibit and expand into hopefully consumption and retail and really become the cultural hub for New York City.
I feel like there's almost like a three-way partnership here. So Brooke's events, your after parties, and then we give Megan a consumption lounge. We use her license so they can actually consume at the Stone Age. All three of you just, I don't know, like transformer thing together too.
That'd be dreamy.
I'm here for it.
Very cool. Sasha, are you thinking of going for a license maybe to make this into a consumption lounge?
Yeah, we've definitely been entertaining it. We've been approached by a couple of different companies about applying for licenses, and it's a lot more challenging than just the applications. I'm sure, Tara, but it is something that we're very much entertaining and exploring, especially knowing kind of the trajectory that, for at least another 18 months, licenses won't really be given or distributed. So we're hopeful that through the next several months that we can start the application process, kind of understand what's entailed. It's happening a lot faster than we had anticipated, but I think long-term it is something that we would very much like to do, being that destination.
Yes. New Jersey is happening in 27 days. And that's happening a lot faster at a certain point than anyone thought. And I am applying myself for a processing license to start making Blazin bakery products. And I'm also consulting for 6 other teams. So if anyone's wondering why I'm on a hat, no hair, and yellow glasses, it's because I have not unpacked my clothes, I haven't showered, and I'm in hiding basically. So yay, application season.
Now in Jersey, Tara, there are all the licenses open up. It's like the opening gate is December 15th for all the licenses. They're not, for example, delaying.
Just cultivation, just cultivation.
Just cultivation.
December 15th is cultivation and manufacturing, and then the dispensaries are in March.
That's actually
Oh, go ahead. I'll tell you a little inside baseball about why it's a deadline for some and not others if you want.
Well, no, I was just going to make a comment. You know, that's actually a smart thing for New Jersey to do, because when you allow all the licenses to start immediately, you can get a retail store opened up way faster than you can put together a cultivation facility. And then even if you can snap your fingers and the cultivation facility is open before the retail, you can't get the plants ready to sell and harvest before the retail store is open, which gives the immediate advantage to the existing growers, which happen to be the medical operators, which are generally the MSOs who will go in, get their medical licenses, even if they're not making money, because they know that plants their flag. And when adult use comes, they then control they have the first mover advantage.
Yeah. So the one thing that's really important to be first with in this round, so it's cultivation, processing, and labs. Processing and labs are unlimited. Within the legislation, we can only have 37 cultivators. And depending which attorney you ask, which, how you're going by it, there's only between 25 and 11 licenses left. So, and since it is a rolling application, they are not scoring them. And it's whoever gets the best score, it's pass, fail. And there is a priority order from kind of 1 to 10 based on all these other factors of how much priority your application gets. So when December 15th happens, if apps are accepted at 12 o'clock, at 12:01, it's a scramble for those cultivation licenses, which are like the golden ring. And once they're gone, they're gone. So every person who wants cultivation is in just a race right now. So, but it is smart that they put the dispensaries off. I'm very happy they did that. That's makes everyone relax a little bit more and focus on the big licenses first, and then all the dispensaries.
I think the one thing, and you did mention this, and this is one of the reasons like the Women in Cannabis Expo came about, because I'm opening a testing lab, is that before you even get to the cultivation and making product, the states that have adopted cannabis for recreational medical use have to go through testing. And we don't have there's no national lab that you can go to. There are mom and pop facilities that are popping up. To have a lab, they're very expensive. They're one of the more pricier things, depending on if you're a cultivator and you have thousands of acres, and that's going to run you more money. But just to have a lab, the equipment alone is $1 million. And if you go to finance it, they want 40%. So just for the lab that I'm opening, I had to raise 2.5 million just to cover me for 2 years. That's a lot of money. And across the board, again, we don't have a national lab. Nobody does, because every state, their parameters for testing are a little bit different. But that is also a very critical element, because if you don't have your product tested, you can't sell it. So people kind of forget about that, and they forget that it's a real specialty to have those labs, and you got to have them run by specific people. In our state, Nevada, I have to follow the law and have somebody who has a biochemist PhD with 2 years of cannabis experience, or they have to have a master's with 4 years of cannabis experience in biochemistry or chemistry, or they can have a bachelor's with 6 years of biochem and chemistry. But again, where would they get that experience? It goes back to that whole question, the cart before the horse, and looking at the timeline of when Nevada adopted cannabis, and are there people that are eligible for those jobs, or do they have to come from out of state?
Wow. Yeah. We need labs badly. That's another thing that you need early on. And Jersey just put out interim rules. We basically copied Maryland's. And a big problem here is, especially with any kind of edibles or expiration, our labs are so backlogged that they're expiring and getting thrown away. Megan, have you had any problems with that up in Mass?
We've had a lot of challenges with testing. Some of it has been metric changes that created massive backlogs. This happened last fall, where they took the batch size from 50 pounds down to 15. And so if you can imagine then how many batches we have to do, it's crazy. And because they have to test each individual batch, it just made a massive, I mean, it took almost 2 months to get out of it. We were waiting 2 months for test results. I mean, 2 months, can you imagine? And then that was for our flower. We don't have manufacturing open yet here, but I know everyone felt such a pain point with that. The other thing that happened is our governor, along with the state health department, banned vapes for, I don't know, 90 days. And then when then they pulled it back and said, okay. And then the rule was, well, you could retest all the vapes you had, which we had $250,000 worth of vapes in our store. So we could retest those via the manufacturer. And so that unleashed, can you imagine how many vape carts hit the testing labs? And at that time, we only had two open. So now we have 3, and really it's better. It's getting better all the time. But if there's ever like that weird regulatory change, which I know everybody on here is a regulatory ninja and understands that happens at the drop of a hat, at the whim, at the wind blowing. And then, then just add competency and quality at the labs. It's hard. And just like Brooke was talking about, the amount of people that have like the significant expertise in testing cannabis, it's a really small number. And, we find that every time a new state opens, the talent vacuum is just massive. And that's across the board. That's not just labs. That's, lead cultivators, ops people. I mean, it's hard. And you gotta, I know what's coming down the pike for canna provisions, and I'm going to be strung really, really thin. It's coming. And I know between New Jersey, Connecticut, and New York, my head's going to be spinning, but it's exciting. It's really exciting. It's just, it's hard.
Very cool. David, we're getting close to the end. Is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you want to?
No, you've been doing a great job. And we've had a great group of guests here. Sasha, I took your in the chat for the panelists is the link if you want to see Sasha's show, and on YouTube, I posted the link there as well. It's a great clip.
Thank you. Yeah, a little teaser of the Stone Age, and we have some videos on the website as well that kind of give you a glimpse into the Stone Age. It's definitely.
So before we do a wrap up, I have a question for each of you, and Brooke, we'll start with you. Knowing what you know now, if you were, I don't know if any of you are country music fans, but like Brad Paisley has got a song from a few years back that if he could talk to himself when he was younger, what would you tell yourself right before you got into this business, knowing what you know now, if you could go back in time?
I would have told myself, first of all, I didn't see myself ever working in cannabis. I came back from a background of 20 years in healthcare, and I have a master's in criminal justice. So the first thing, if you would have told me I'd be working in cannabis, I probably would have laughed. Now, the things that I do know and the things I've experienced is that you're going to come up against a lot of challenges. And just when you think you've overcome one, there's 5 more thrown your way. And so you just have to stay with it. And I feel like I'm in a position where I'm in the happiest moment in my life is being here and being in this industry. It's nothing that I expected. It's everything, I guess, that I hope for in a way. It's challenging, it's different, but that just every day is different. Don't expect it to be the same old every day.
Sasha, how about you?
I feel like Brooke completely read my entire monologue. I echo all of that. Never anticipated being in the industry, although I've always had a relationship with cannabis as far back as I can remember into my adolescence, which has very much evolved. And if there's one thing, I would tell myself is certainly give myself a lot more time because, timing is everything, and things that, because of all of the red tape and all of the obstacles, things that should in a normal circumstance take a set amount of time that, we're used to operating in, take exponentially longer because we're constantly putting out fires and constantly dealing with things that we normally wouldn't deal with in other industries. So I think, staying the course, really trusting the vision, Been very fortunate to have tremendous community. And I think that that's helped me kind of stay the course throughout this and fulfill my vision and my dream of creating something like the Stone Age. But definitely, yeah, time, resources, and a lot of money.
So Megan, we're going to change the question up for you because you already did this, right? You started out in Colorado, it was?
Yeah.
And came to Massachusetts. So you already had the opportunity on the drive from Denver to the Western Mass to talk to yourself in the car with all those hours and say, what should I do differently this time? So you've done it in Denver. You've been successful in Massachusetts. If you were to do this again, what would you tell yourself to do differently? And what were some of the different experiences based in like the Colorado market versus the Mass market?
I would say when you asked that question initially, the very first thing that I thought of was choose your investors wisely. That has been my biggest pain point in all of this. That's over regulators, that's over zoning committees, that's over, all of that. And so what I learned and continue to learn, we're all, I think, probably learning leaders on this podcast. And I just feel like I keep learning to be a little bit smarter, a little bit better about this or that. I think that, we did remarkably here in Massachusetts. I can tell you our runway in Colorado was 3 years probably to get stabilized. And we did it in almost 6 months here. So pretty incredible growth for this company. And that was just knowledge of the industry and being able to get up and going fast. But I would say that the one thing that I would definitely tell myself, even now versus the Denver to the Massachusetts, just looking back on Massachusetts, is not to stress out so much. I really sweat sometimes the small stuff or what seems like really big stuff, but it all ends up being fine. And knowing that so many times it's always ended up being fine, I wish I could give myself a little advice that it's going to be okay. Don't lose so many sleepless nights over stressing about cannabis regulators, investors, and inspections and all those things that happen. And when you're a good operator, you do a good job. It's okay. So that was definitely part of it.
So Tara, I got a question for you. On putting aside investors, how many people on your licensing team? Like on your founding team, how many people do you have?
Who have ownership or who
have ownership, let's say.
Oh, me. Just me.
You. Okay. Brooke, how about you?
For the licensing team, I don't have anybody for licensing team, just myself.
Just you. Sasha?
So I have a co-founder. And we have an investor that has equity in the company.
Yeah, I'm more concerned about the operational side. Megan, how many people did you have on the operational side on your licensing team, owners, founders, skip the investors, but the people who are doing the real hard work when you first started in Colorado, and how many on the Massachusetts team?
In Colorado, it was really just me and my attorney.
Yep.
And that grew quite a bit as we became operational. Obviously, we have a full compliance team. And here in Massachusetts, it was just me and my partner, Erik. And that's who got the licenses.
Wow, that's impressive. So there's an old saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I've done a lot of entrepreneurial things. I have learned in the marijuana, I tip my hat to all of you, because I wouldn't try to open up a marijuana business for a number of reasons without a full team, right? So that means you guys are doing a lot of work to pull it off, because it's just like Tara, what you're seeing in New Jersey. You're like, I can't wait for licensing. I can't wait for licensing. And all of a sudden it opens up and you're like, I can't believe it's going too fast. I need more time, because there are so many things you need to do that most people don't get, because this is federally illegal. It's like, I don't know how many of you have young children, but there's that old riddle for kids. What is it that you throw away the outside, cook the inside, eat the outside, and throw away the inside? Anybody know that one? Corn.
Oh.
And I think about that riddle every time I think about cannabis, because what is it that it's illegal at the federal level, legal at the state level, tolerated at the federal level, and operated at the state level, right? It's just this weird paradigm. And is such a complex business because of the conflict between state and federal laws. Just try to open a bank account. You're not talking about walking into a bank and signing a few papers and filling out one page. You could have, in Massachusetts, some of the banks, you're talking about a 15-page application that can take 3 days to gather all the information to fill out. So it becomes a really complex business. And when you have to, all of a sudden the start line comes and you got to get all that done, I tip my hat. I would not try to do this alone. I've been involved with several licensing teams that I've put together. And as we talked about earlier, our current team has got 10 people on it who are on the founding side. I would not, I tip my hat to you women, because I would not want to be trying to do this thing with a 1 or 2 people, especially with how competitive in any kind of competitive licensing state, meaning like New Jersey, to get a cultivation license, that's got to be brutally competitive with a limited number of licenses.
Yes.
Anyway, we're going to go back around, and I think we're going to start with you, Brooke. How do people get in touch with you or find your website, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so anybody can get in touch with me if they Google Woman in Cannabis Expo, or they write Woman in Cannabis Expo at yahoo.com. My name will come up, my company name will come up, everything will come up under Google, but that is my main email, or they can always call our office at 775-800-1414, or they can always call me on my cell, 775-771-1431.
Cool. Sasha, tell us how they can get in touch with you and how like your exhibit.
Yeah, so you can check out our website. It's thestoneagenyc.com. We're also have a pretty big presence on social media. Welcome to Stone Age. And then for any emails directly to me, Sasha at thestoneagenyc.com. I would totally give out my number, but I get too many calls already. So funneling everything through email. But yeah, all of the latest happenings through the website and through our Instagram.
And Megan, I mean, to find you is pretty easy. Just look at the top of the Mass Pike that's worn out from New York to Lee. But tell us how we would do it otherwise.
So I'm Meg at cannaprovisionsgroup.com. Our website is cannaprovisions.com. On Insta, I'm Megawana. And on Facebook, I'm Meg Sanders. You can also find my company, Canna Provisions and Canna Provisions Group, on both Facebook and Insta. And we have a ton of media. So I encourage and invite all of you, if you'd like to really see some inside stuff about Canna Provisions, just Google us, and there's a lot of news that's coming up.
That's great. We've had a lot of great guests on the show. Hold on, Tara. I didn't forget about you. And I want to thank you three, as well as the guests that were on the earlier panels. But I want to give a great thanks to my co-host, Tara Misu. It was great seeing you again. Tara, remind everybody how they find you.
Okay. First off, thank you, David. Great always getting a chance to hang with you. You can find me at social everywhere at I am Tara Misu. So AIAM Tara Misu. And my company is Blazin Bakery, BLAZIN Bakery. So it's blazinbakery.com and everywhere social at Blazin Bakery.
That's great. So I want to thank everybody who's here with us, as well as our prior panelists. This concludes this episode of the Green Rush. We'll do this again. We won't be doing this again next Friday because I believe we're taking Thanksgiving off, but we've got some great shows coming up, probably in December. We've got well, I got to remember to put the teaser in, right? We've this week on We Talk News, I believe we've got the interview between our founder, Jimmy Young, and Steve Van Zandt that took place at Meg's facility this past week. And next month, we're going to have a special episode with Dina Martin, the woman in Massachusetts who was arrested in 2018 for running a big-time marijuana home delivery business. Recently cut a deal with the feds, took a plea, and I believe she's got a 4-year prison sentence that's going to come up. But aside from what we hear in the media, and aside from the way it's portrayed by the attorneys in the legal system, we're going to peel back the onion next month and spend 90 minutes with her. And we're going to understand the journey she went through and how it all started with an illness with one of her children that drove her into the medical side of it, and the different time she came to forks in the road and why she chose one direction over a different direction that ultimately ended up where she is today. But it's a fascinating story. It's going to be another woman in weed story with a much different twist. So join us for that. As Jimmy always says when he ends the show, it's a whole new whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for joining in. I'm your host, David Rabinovitz, The Green Rush. We do this every Friday at 4. Thank you.
Coming up on We Talk News this week, Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace's personal reason for introducing federal cannabis reform is released, and we will share. Plus, West Virginia opens its first medical cannabis dispensary, while the FDA continues to dawdle about CBD guidelines with no end in sight. Rock legend Stephen Van Zandt gets into the cannabis game at Canna Provisions in Holyoke, and the Harvest Cup is history for another year in Massachusetts. We have the results for the best weed in the Bay State. Plus, celebrities seen hanging out with Caroline Frankel. Which one was the former heavyweight champ of the world, you ask? It's not Jimmy Young, that's for sure. We Talk News is next.
Media programming and PCM TV is supported by Revolutionary Clinics, Massachusetts' #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first. And by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry. And by Artery Pay, easy, cheap, fun, and legal, just like cannabis should be.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elena Pinto in Boston for We Talk News and Pro Cannabis Media. This week, federal legalization is back at the forefront. Representative Nancy Mace of South Carolina filed a bill to federally decriminalize cannabis and give states freer rein to pass their own laws and regulations. Mace said this bill had personal meanings to her, and she shared that reason on Fox Business's Kennedy this week, saying she used cannabis to help treat depression after being raped as a teenager. While some advocates want to see more inclusive social equity measures added to the bill, it's admirable and incredibly vulnerable for Representative Mace to share this story. And it leads to the larger conversation about bipartisan support for cannabis. The FDA is doubling down on its stance about CBD. The acting Cannabis Product Committee chair for the FDA, Grail Sipes, says the agency wants additional research and safety data on CBD before it can be considered for use as a food additive or dietary supplement. Sipes also reiterating it is unlawful for CBD to be used as an ingredient in human or animal food or to be sold in interstate commerce. With that, let's check in on one of the leading states in the industry. Here's Christopher Smith with our California report.
Hey, thanks for the intro, guys. Here's the California Roundup for Weed Talk News. California is celebrating 25 years of medicinal cannabis, and it's important that we give credit to the gay community that spearheaded legalization. Cannabis legend Dennis Perrone, one of the co-authors of Proposition 215, which allowed medical cannabis patients to legally have cannabis medicine, pursued legalization in the early 1990s because his partner was suffering from AIDS. He ultimately died, said Perrone, but then I did Prop 215 for all the people who couldn't get treatment. We had people going to jail who had AIDS, people who were intimidating cancer patients. I wanted them to be able to defend themselves. But it turns out I wrote 215 for a sick nation that was being swallowed up by prohibition, a nation that had created fear toward anyone who would dare to talk about marijuana. Perrone died in 2018, just a few months before full legalization was approved by voters. Oakland. The city of Oakland plans to end cannabis testing for most city employees. The Oakland City Council Public Safety Committee unanimously approved a proposal to end cannabis drug testing for most city employees last week. Labor unions that represent city employees or workers must approve the change before it moves to full council for approval. Council member Rebecca Kaplan, the ordinance sponsor, says the city shouldn't be weeding out workers for something that's legal. And Weed Maps and Burner are launching a cannabis-friendly social media site. Finally, Irvine, California-based cannabis technology company Weed Maps and San Francisco-based rapper and cannabis entrepreneur Burner are planning to launch a social media platform on marijuana.com, describing it as the Instagram of marijuana. Berner, who founded the massive multi-state operator Cookies brand, says this is in response to the many cannabis businesses who have lost valuable accounts and followers because of the crackdown by Facebook and Instagram. The rebellion is on. And I'm Christopher Smith from the American Cannabis Report, sending peace and love from Cannabis Heaven, California, for Weed Talk News.
More companies are moving across state lines, hoping to capitalize on the budding legal markets. Jushi Holdings, based in Florida, has acquired Nevada-based New Leaf for a whopping $62.5 million. With that, here's our Green Market Report with Deborah Borchardt.
I'm Deborah Borchardt, and this is your business update from Green Market Report for Weed Talk News. We are still in the thick of earnings season, and this week, well, some of the companies delivered some numbers that were a little bit sloppy. The best report came from True Leaf Cannabis, who announced that its third quarter revenue increased 64% to $224.1 million. They beat estimates. Verano Holdings also had good results for the third quarter with revenues of $207 million, better than the second quarter's revenue of $199 million. So things are moving in the right direction. But TPCO Holding Corp., also known as the parent company, announced their financial numbers and came in with an eye-popping charge of $570 million. The parent company's revenue for the quarter was just $39.7 million. And TerrAscend Corp. Reported that its third quarter revenues dropped by 16% sequentially to $49.1 million from the second quarter's $58.7 million. And that's it for this week. I'm Deborah Borchardt, and that has been the business update from Green Market Report for Weed Talk News.
In the neighborhoods near Capitol Hill, people are still trying to navigate the new regulations around cannabis. This week, the district council will hear a legalization bill, and some advocates want to see small businesses get in on the action. If adopted, a proposed amendment would allow small entrepreneurs to sell cannabis at farmers markets in DC. While marijuana has been legal for adult use to use and possess there for 7 years now, a congressional rider has stalled the regulated market. This could open some doors for smaller business in the meantime. And staying with the East Coast, let's check in with Ron Marshalsea for our Massachusetts report.
I'm Ron Marshalsea with the Massachusetts Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. The Harvest Cup in Worcester was back this year after not being able to be in person last year, and Pro Cannabis Media's own Jimmy Young was there to catch all the excitement.
How gratifying is it to look around and see face-to-face people at your show again?
Very grateful. Glad to be back.
Is the turnout bigger than you expected? What do you see so far?
Yeah, it definitely is. Full house. We have more entries than we've ever had. We beat 2019. I think we have 167 total.
Is cannabis flourishing here in Worcester? Is this not like the premier capital of cannabis in Massachusetts now?
I believe it's the hub, yep, for sure. They call it Boston, but Worcester's, I think, the cannabis hub.
And you guys had a lot to do with that. So, I mean, you must be pretty proud of this.
For sure, absolutely.
The winners in a couple categories over the weekend were Northeast Alternatives winning the sweet edible category, Trican won the concentrates category, and the sativa and indica flower categories went to City Slickers Genetics and House of Cultivar, respectively. Since the legalization of marijuana in Massachusetts 5 years ago, the equity goals built into the 2016 ballot approved by voters still have not been fully realized. Shalene Title, a former commissioner who co-authored the Massachusetts ballot question on legalization, was quoted as saying, "The Cannabis Committee and legislature really need to decide, are they going to implement those fixes or are they going to continue with inaction? Which, in that case, they're really proactively deciding that this multi-billion-dollar industry is going to be for wealthy white men and big tobacco." Title also says that host community agreements and a fund for social equity financed by a new cannabis tax are simple things that can help with the inequity. And finally, Tilt Holdings announced that the Cannabis Control Commission approved Tilt's subsidiary, Commonwealth Alternative Care, to commence adult-use retail operations at its Brockton dispensary effective November 22nd, 2021. The Brockton location will become CAC's first adult-use dispensary, and their Taunton location is also expected to receive its final adult-use license by the end of the year. That's this week's Massachusetts Cannabis Report. For Weed Talk News, I'm Ron Marshallsey.
Regulations could be changing for medical marijuana caregivers in Michigan. A proposed bill would cut the number of plants caregivers can grow from 72 to just 24. And it seems some patients and customers are responding with their dollars. With more on that, here's Michigan NORML Executive Director and our Canacaster, Rick Thompson. Rick.
Hello, everyone. This is the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News. Let's begin. I'm happy to start off with news of a huge October for cannabis sales in Michigan. The industry is up 59% over last year with a single monthly total of $163.5 million. Medical sales down around 18% over last year, but recreational sales advanced to set a new record for the adult use industry in Michigan. Now, is the Customs and Border Protection Agency breaking the law when they seize marijuana paraphernalia? The answer is yes, if you live in Michigan or Colorado, according to a new report available on Reuters. The Medical Marijuana Act and the MRTMA in Michigan and changes made to the Colorado Constitution allow for the sale and distribution of items the federal government labels as drug accessories. Should the Border Patrol know better? Absolutely, since the federal law passed in 1986 includes an exemption for state legal activities. Hey guys, it's in section 863, which was argued in a 2017 case. Boy, Port Huron is a mess. The city did not honor the will of the people and crafted a crazy licensing scheme for cannabis businesses, which was prejudicial and discriminatory. At least that's the claim made by several contenders in the Port Huron cannabis license circus, and they've sued the city to have their say in court. That day will come in June of 2022. To counteract this bad city policy, a ballot proposal was put before voters in August of this year to create a new program. The voters approved it, but the city sued to stop the new law from going into place. Multiple issues exist. The only winners are the lawyers, and there's no end in sight to the legal wrangling taking place in the Blue Water Bridge City. Governor Gretchen Whitmer and a bipartisan coalition of governors from 21 states, 2 territories, and the mayor of the District of Columbia call on congressional leadership to pass the Secure and Fair Enforcement Banking Act, the SAFE Act. Now, that would remove legal limitations and allow financial institutions to bank with state licensed cannabis businesses. Now, Whitmer's also signed 2 other letters supporting the SAFE Banking Act, one in June of 2019 and one in April of 2020. On September 21st of this year, the U.S. House of Representatives added the SAFE Banking Amendment by voice vote to the NDAA, and the SAFE Banking Act has now passed the U.S. House of Representatives 5 times, but the Senate has never voted on the measure. But by far, the most important story of the day is the massive product recall issued by Michigan's marijuana regulatory agency yesterday, on Wednesday, the 17th of November. All flower tested for 3 months and from 2 labs has been ordered destroyed or returned for retesting. Veritas Labs is the culprit. Seems they didn't properly screen for aspergillus, an extremely rare cannabis contaminant. It's not surprising this lab would be found in violation, though, as they were already fined and reprimanded by the regulatory agency for charging cannabis companies to perform heavy metals testing they were not licensed to perform. They blamed that failure on a misunderstanding of the law. Really? Here's the funny part. These 2 labs are run by former cops, and more specifically, former principals from the Michigan State Police Crime Lab. And that's it for the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News.
West Virginia finally has its very first medical dispensary. The governor signed the state's medical cannabis bill into law 4 years ago, but it took until now for the regulated market to get going. MSO Trulieve has now opened stores in Morgantown and Weston, with 2 more on the way. And hopefully we'll be able to see even more companies cash in on the green rush in West Virginia. For more on what's going on in the medical world, here's Jessie Lynn Dolan in Vermont with our Green Nurse Report.
I'm Jessie Lynn Dolan from Nurse Grown Organics and Vermont Cannabis Nurses, and this is the Weed Talk News Vermont Report. On Tuesday, November 16th, the Vermont Coalition for Equity in Cannabis met for a community conversation to discuss the numerous recommendations they provided to the Cannabis Control Board and how these social equity suggestions remain unaddressed. The National Association of Cannabis Businesses, an out-of-state consultant group hired by the Vermont Cannabis Control Board, will be conducting a series of social equity town halls, gathering and then compiling recommendations that will provide the Cannabis Control Board with a post-town hall meeting report, both in person and virtual. The first meeting was Thursday, November 18th in Winooski, and the second on Saturday, November 20th in Waterbury. The full advisory committee to the Cannabis Control Board convened Friday, November 19th to begin discussing some of the board's drafted rules. The meetings are open for the public to attend in person or available online, always with opportunity for public comment, though few Vermonters have taken advantage of this option. Vermonters, the time is now to speak up, even if your voice shakes. That's the Vermont Report for Weed Talk News. I'm Vermont's cannabis nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan.
Missouri's medical cannabis program has seemingly taken off, and businesses based in the Show Me State are stepping up to show what they've been working on. Soon, patients will be able to start sipping on cannabis-infused seltzer, the first ever made right in Missouri. Let's check in with Brandon Jones with our Missouri Report.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones with Distribution Maven with your Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. My first story today comes from Springfield News Leader. Missouri proposes rules allowing marijuana dispensaries to promote sales events. So basically, this is touching on the basis of the last law that was changed that didn't allow the dispensaries to promote any of their events, any of their prices, so that people wouldn't be biased on what particular items they were coming to purchase. So now they're going to propose that as long as they have a disclaimer, that now the dispensaries will be able to do this. So the disclaimer reads, medical decisions should not be made based on advertising. Consult a physician on the benefits and risk of particular medical marijuana products. So basically, as long as the disclaimer is read, they think the bias is now taken away. So at least the dispensaries will be able to tell the patients what products are out there, what the prices are, if there's promotions, to do events, to get people to come out and just promote. So it's good for business for everybody to be able to promote what they're doing. My second report is something that's a little bit near and dear to the heart. It's about recreational going legal here in 2022. So right now, there's two main proposals that are being brought to the table. The first one that I'm going to talk about this week is brought by Fair Access Missouri. The two big disclaimers or differences between the two parties is this one wants a lower access to everyone. So basically the right to get a license is only $2,500, and then the certificate is only $1,000 more. Also, a big discrepancy between this would be personal cultivation. This one already shows that it would be described by the actual canopy size, not the number of plants. Currently, you're allowed to have 6 plants in each phase. But right now, this would give it up to a 25 feet canopy if this new initiative was to pass. So I would tell everyone to go look at Fair Access Missouri, go see what the proposal is, decide. And next week, I'll be having the second proposal here on Weed Talk News. So again, I'm Brandon Jones from Distribution Maven. This is your Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Thanks a lot, everybody, and have a great weekend.
In celebrity cannabis, Rock and Roll Hall of Famer and Sopranos actor Steven Van Zandt is bringing his underground apothecary line of cannabis products to Canna Provisions in Holyoke and Lee, Massachusetts. Van Zandt is the lead guitarist in the East Street Band that played with Bruce Springsteen for years, and now he's bringing his passion for music to cannabis in order to help others with the amazing wellness properties of the plant. PCM founder Jimmy Young sat down with Steven for a special In the Weeds interview for next week. Everyone's favorite Old West stoner is getting some special recognition. Willie Nelson is slated to receive the Clio Cannabis Lifetime Achievement Award. Launched in 2019, Clio Cannabis celebrates the creators at the forefront of cannabis marketing and communications. And I think most of us can agree Willie has always communicated his support for cannabis. I'm Elena Pinto for Weed Talk News. And remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
Difference is building a solution for that individual. Not just a custom, here's a box, here's a video, here's how you make your VMS. We custom design and custom build every situation for exactly what the customer needs. And we keep the costs low. We have multiple tiers, as far as what you're looking at on the cost side of things. If you want a one-time, where you just pay one initial cost, we have that. If you want to maintain your system and have the highest protection and highest capabilities and highest upgrades at all times, we have different plans for you. But we scale it so it's scalable and affordable 100%.
Pro Cannabis Media programming is available live and on demand on our Facebook page at Pro Canna Media, on Instagram at Pro Cannabis Media, on LinkedIn also at Pro Cannabis Media, on YouTube and YouTube Live on Pro Cannabis Media, Twitter at Pro Canna Media, and on twitch.tv/Pro Cannabis Media. So like, share, and subscribe to all of our content, newsletters, and shows live or on demand.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.